Hey, I'm Siobhan, and I love talking about all the things related to freedom and personal growth. And I'm on a journey to redefine freedom on my own terms as I become the woman I desire to be. Each week, I'll share in real time what I'm learning as I do my inner work while creating a safe space for my listeners to feel seen. If you desire to be free and live a life that feels good to you, then you're in the right place for beautiful conversations that's going to support you on your journey to freedom. Welcome to the Siobhan J. Middleton podcast. Now let's start the show. Hey, welcome back to another episode of my podcast. Thank you for taking time to tune in for another week. Again, I'm so happy, as always, that you are here. Before we get into today's topic, I want to thank every single person that's listening. Like, seriously, it means the world to me. And one of the things I've been talking on the podcast a lot about is integrating my audience. And so having male and female listeners is extremely important to me. And I've been getting more and more male listeners thanks to skating. There's been several guys that I met there that have subscribed to my podcast, and then guys in other places and things like that. And it has given me so much delight because they are sharing their feedback with me. Now, of course, women are more open, I guess, with their feedback. So they're going to share and express more. But men are like, yeah, I love it. It's good, you know. But one guy in particular, we were skating last week and he had listened to the episode, Everything Changed in 8 Minutes. And so as we're skating and he's telling me about, like, you know, his thoughts on the episode, one of the things that I could tell from the way that he was looking at me, like there was concern in his eyes. And he said something around like, man, you've been through a lot and you shared a lot. And I tend to keep things more private. And I was like, honestly, I only share a good 5%, if that, on the podcast. 95% or more, I keep to myself out of respect for myself, my ex, if you will. And there's just some things that don't need to be shared. Like, I do not give the details. However, I am going to share my experience from my perspective. So when I mentioned, and I think this is a thing that stood out to him, is that I experienced emotional and psychological abuse. It has taken me years to even figure out that that's what I was experiencing. And so now that I am expressing that, I'm not giving the details because I don't think that that's necessary, but just know that there are other reasons to leave a marriage that has nothing to do with infidelity or physical abuse. And so I've had someone reach out to me recently and she was like, you know, can you give some of the signs on what the emotional and psychological abuse look like? And honestly, everybody's experience is different. So that's not something that I'm really going to speak to because I'm still learning a lot. I mean, even the other day I had a memory and I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot that this happened and it made me feel a certain kind of way. So I say that to say I'm really grateful for all of my listeners and I am sharing with you guys in real time. And I'm also being mindful of my experience and not giving details, but just giving you some of the things I'm learning through this. And then the other thing is, again, I'm deeply appreciative of all my listeners, but as I'm growing my listeners as it relates to males, like I really appreciate the feedback. So if you are a male that's listening, I would love for you to leave a review and say, hey, this is what I thought of the episode. This is my perspective. This is something I would like to hear you talk more about. I definitely want to hear that. And actually, that's for everyone. Like, I really want you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, or you can always shoot me a DM. I've been getting voice notes and things like that. So that has been really, really helpful. And let me know, like, how is my work resonating with you? What are you going to do different as it relates to what you heard? Share it with a friend. I deeply appreciate that because my work means a lot to me. And one of the things that I am being intentional around is getting more visibility and more listeners. And the way that you do that is that you got to rate it, you got to review it. So even if you've already reviewed it, review again, review again, review again. I mean, every single episode, if it hits home, let me know. All right, so let's get on to today's topic, and it's titled Target, IKEA, Tulum. Now, you may be thinking, what the heck are you about to talk about? with my favorite places. But here we go. I think today's topic is going to be more about fear than anything. I lived in fear and just being afraid to just be for a very, very, very long time. In fact, it was instilled in me as a child, and it followed me throughout adulthood, where I was just afraid to do things or afraid to step out of my comfort zone just by being extremely cautious. And I've always admired people who lived spontaneously or who did things out of not being fearful, who just maybe up and relocated to a different city or started a new job or whatever. Like, I was like, wow, that's really brave, not knowing that that was something that I was craving to do for myself. And my fear has been a cage for me. And so I was thinking when I was preparing for this episode, well, where did that start? And I believe my fear started with my grandmother, whom I love dearly. But she would always say things to me like, Siobhan, it's too late for you to be out, or is it safe for you to walk outside by yourself when it's daytime? Or she'll say, if I was going out of town, who else is going with you? Because she feared me being alone. And it wasn't just the fear from her, but it was also the fear from family as well. And my grandmother is a God-fearing woman, and she also projected her fear on me. So that's not a judgment. It's just based on her own lived experiences out of protection for me, though she instilled her fear in me, if that makes sense. And so I learned that it wasn't safe for me to do things. It wasn't safe for me to trust my intuition, that I would live out her fear and other people's fears versus living in my truth. And so the three experiences that I'm going to share with you today is me living and choosing myself, moving past the fear and doing what I want to do anyway. So I believe I shared this story on here before about my Target experience. Several years ago, I was on the phone with one of my friends, and I was saying how I was craving something sweet. Like I wanted some chocolate and some pretzels, and I just wanted some snacks. And it probably was about 8 or 9 at night. And she was like, well, why don't you just go get some? And I'm like, well, it's late. I can't go outside now. It's dark. And she was like, but you live up the street from Target, don't you? I said, yeah, but it's dark outside. Like, I cannot go outside. She was like, but you're grown. I don't understand. And you have a car. And I was like, I know, but it's dark. It's nighttime. It's after 9. So I kept giving all of these excuses as to why I couldn't go. And I was like, all right, I really want these snacks. I'm going to go, but you got to stay on the phone with me the whole time. And so she agreed. I go to Target at nighttime. And let me just say, in my house, I lived 5 minutes, if that, from Target. It literally was up the street. And I told my kids before I left, I said, hey, I'm about to go to Target right quick to get some snacks. And my son was like, you going out now? Like, it's dark out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going out. I'm going to get some snacks. And then, of course, they give me their list of the things that they want, of course, like teens, right? But anywho, so I get to Target, I get my snacks, I get back home safely. And when I tell you I had anxiety on my way there because I couldn't believe I was going outside at nighttime. And also, when I got back, I was so excited and proud of myself for doing it. Now, this may seem so bizarre to someone else listening, but if you were raised in fear, then you know that bad things happen at night and that a woman shouldn't be outside by herself at night. Now, I'm not saying that you don't practice safety, you're not aware of your surroundings, all of that. But to go to Target at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night to get some snacks and come right back home, really, you know? So that's my first experience. And it was successful. The next thing is, this past fall, I went to IKEA by myself for a road trip on a Thursday at 4 something in the afternoon. Now, the reason that I am emphasizing the time and the day is because I do not believe I have ever taken a solo trip by myself to do something so spontaneously at all. Again, I was on the phone, same friend, and we were talking about plants, and she was telling me how she saw that at IKEA they have monstera plants. I'm like, oh, there's a IKEA up the 2 hours away from me. One day I'll go when I get a friend to go with me. And she was like, well, why can't you just go by yourself? And I'm like, I can't go to IKEA by myself. And she was like, why not? I'm like, because it's 2 hours away in Columbus. And she was like, but you do Instacart and you probably drive more than that every day. I'm like, yeah, but there'll be a lot of wear and tear on my car. And she was like, wouldn't it be the same wear and tear on your car that you do Instacart with? I said, yeah, but it's a Thursday and I got to get Jordan, my daughter, from school. And she was like, isn't she 17? Right? So everything that I said, she had a rebuttal for. And I'm like, all right, I really wanted these plants. I was doing some work on healing my inner child. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. So I pick up my daughter from school. I get her Chick-fil-A for dinner. And I'm like, I'm going on a road trip. I'm going to Columbus to get some plants. And she was like, all right. And then she was like, wait, IKEA is 2 hours away in Columbus. I said, I know, but I'm going. And she was like, all right. So I drop her off. I get in my car. I fill up my gas tank. I drive 2 hours with anxiety in my stomach about going to IKEA on a Thursday afternoon on a beautiful fall day. I get there. I pull up in the parking lot and I'm so excited because I cannot believe I just did this. I go in and I'm just browsing the store. And y'all, I love IKEA. That would be a perfect brand partnership for me, by the way. But anywho, I go through and I'm picking up a few other things that I wanted to get, like this mug, a French press coffee maker, and I get to the plants. And I'm probably in the plant section for a good hour, browsing all the beautiful plants. I started talking to some of the ladies that were there who were also buying plants, and I had a whole moment, and I felt so good. I get my plants and my things. I get back in my car. At this point, it's probably like 8 something at night. I stop at Chick-fil-A to get some food. I get a Krispy Kreme donut. And then I blast my music. I'm listening to Renaissance, MJG and 8 Ball, Tupac the whole way home, jamming and feeling so good. I get home a little after 10 that night with my new plants. My daughter was waiting on me. And I was like, oh my God, I did it. I got there safely. I made it back safely. And I did this random thing on a Thursday. And I was so freaking proud of myself. The last thing is, and I talked about this a few weeks ago, is my trip to Tulum, which I was going to stay there with a friend for a couple of days who had been living there for 6 weeks. And I wanted to visit her first and foremost, but also I wanted to celebrate and acknowledge my divorce. Now, I have never been out of the country by myself just because before, and especially to celebrate a moment or acknowledge it. And I did it. And when I tell you it was the best experience ever, because every trip that I've done, whether Target, IKEA, and now Tulum, each time I'm taking these trips, it's inspiring me to do the next thing, but also it's decreasing my fear and changing my beliefs on what it means to be grown, what it means to be a woman, letting go of the fears that my grandmother projected onto me and creating my own beliefs. And now I'm ready for the next trip, the next place that I get to adventure to and be curious about, simply because I want to do it. Now, the interesting thing about this is, and I'm sure you probably can feel the same way, where I thought I was the only person that was afraid to do something by myself, whether it was take a road trip, go to Target up the street, or travel out the country. But the more that I've been sharing and talking to people, I realize, no, there are so many people who have similar fears. For example, I was talking to this woman last fall, and I was telling her about my trip to Target. And she was like, I also, have been afraid to go for a walk by myself. She said, I will go to the metro parks and I will park my car, but I was too afraid to get out the car and go for a walk by myself because, like you, there has been fears that have been projected on me that a woman couldn't go for a walk by herself, or you needed somebody with you. It's not safe for you out there. And so, y'all, she was so afraid to go for a walk by herself until she one day built up the courage to do it. And she was so proud of herself. And in that moment, I'm like, oh, I'm not the only one who has this experience. There are other people who also are afraid to do things. And then there was this guy I was talking to who we were talking about podcasting and entrepreneurship. And he told me how he wanted to start a podcast, but he was waiting on his two friends. But they've been dragging their feet. And I'm like, well, why don't you just get started without them? And he gave me every excuse under the sun as to why he had to wait on his friends to do it. And what I heard is that he was too afraid to do it by himself. And then most recently, a friend of mine, I was sharing these same stories with her. And she was like, I've never done anything by myself. I've always had my kids. And I've been too afraid to do things or to try something. Like she was saying how she had never been to the movies by herself. She had never taken herself out to dinner. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, okay, I want to challenge you. I want you to go to the movies this week. And she was like, yeah, I've been wanting to see The Little Mermaid. And she was like, I'm going to do it. So she called me a couple of days later, or actually she sent me a voice note, and she told me about her experience, how she went to a matinee. She got her popcorn and all her snacks. She sat in the seat that she wanted to sit in, and she enjoyed The Little Mermaid and how good she felt for finally, and she's 40-something years old, but finally doing something just for her and not being afraid to be by herself. So I'm sharing all of these experiences because if you too can relate to not starting that project or not traveling solo or not going to a movie or dinner or always just feeling like you need to have somebody with you, you're not alone. And also, I want this to be encouragement for you to try to do something solo. And what I strongly believe is that every step forward counts, that no situation is too big or too small. Like, because we all are living out our own experiences, no one can judge like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you were afraid to go to Target, or I can't believe you were afraid to go to the movies or to start a podcast. No, all of our fears are coming from somewhere. And so how we're experiencing them, that is specific to us, right? So I want you to think about something that you've been afraid to or been wanting to do. And are you waiting for somebody else to do it with you before you get started? And whatever that thing is, I want you to think about, why are you afraid? What are some of the fears that have been projected onto you? And decide that you're going to take one little baby step out of your comfort zone. We hear the saying all the time to do it afraid, and that's good in theory. But if you're like me, the anxiety and the thought alone is enough for you to live in fear. And now that I think about it, actually for the past 3 years, I have been doing my life moving away from fear and leaning into my freedom. Hence the reason why I walked away from my marriage. I'm now living on my own in my own apartment, and so many other things. Like, even when it comes to my company, letting go of all of the things I was doing to only focus on my writing and my podcast. I'm doing these things even with the fear, but it's taking little bitty moments like Target, IKEA, and Tulum to be able to make bigger steps in my life. Now, I'm not sure what's next for me. And yes, there will be some fear that comes up in different ways, but I'm going to use these experiences to keep moving forward, because the goal for me is to be free. And I believe you who are listening, that's what you want as well. You want to be free. You want to live a life that feels good on the inside and that you reflect that on the outside. And the way that you're going to be able to do that is get comfortable with you, move past your fears so you can truly, truly live the life that you want. I would love, love, love for you to share this episode with a friend. Make sure that you're subscribed anywhere that you tune into podcasts, so that way you never miss an episode. You can share the link with a friend. I would love for you to share it on social media and tag me. My link is always in the show notes. If you were inspired by today's message, you can treat me to a cup of coffee. Thank you, everyone who is treating me every single week. I appreciate it. And lastly, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. That link is in the show notes. And the newsletter is a great complement to the podcast. And there's two different options. You can become a free subscriber where you get the weekly newsletter for free every week. And then the other option is to become a paid subscriber where you get video content and resources and access to chat with me. All of that can be found in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, don't forget to rate this podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Leave a review. I deeply appreciate it. Reach out to me in the DMs. I can't wait to hear from you. And sending you so much love and light. And I hope you have an amazing day.